Okay, guys, we're back for the second half of our lecture. Before we jump into the discussion on simplicity and stewardship, a couple of you guys have sent some emails about some challenges in getting some of the online the commentaries for the BIPs. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on the best way to go about doing that, and just to help you guys out. So let's say, for example, so today you're doing if you're doing your BIP on the Proverbs passage, you're going to want a Proverbs commentary. Okay, so here's my recommendation. Type in, you go on the university's library website, type in Proverbs commentary and do your search there. So this is what you should get. Here's what I'm recommending for you guys, because right now this is only giving me anything and everything that Biola has, both in the library and online for the commentary search. Go to source types, click on ebooks. This will limit your search to just online stuff. All right. And now from here again, so I'm limiting you guys to only certain commentaries. I'm wanting you guys to interact with the good and the best stuff out there. So if you recall, the Bible study resources document that I put on Canvas, it's in the BIP material folder, has the list of the recommended commentaries. There's an intermediate list and there's an advanced list. Don't be too intimidated by looking at the advanced stuff. You'll actually find, I feel, that some of the better stuff is in the advanced stuff. They cover more helpful information. But either way, so number 2 here, this was actually on my list. If you look at the Bible study resource list, has my commentaries listed according to their series, okay? They're not listed according to their titles. The title of this book is Proverbs: An Introduction and Commentary, okay? Here's the author, Lindsay Wilson. But what you see on the Bible Study Resources document is the name of the commentary series. On my list is this one right here, Tyndale Old Testament Commentary Series. So this one is good enough for you, okay? So just click on PDF full text and it'll take you to the commentary and you can actually do your search in there. This one is also on my list. The title is Proverbs 10 through 31. But the challenge is it doesn't really show, I'm not sure why this is, but it doesn't give the series information like it does, sorry about that. It doesn't give the series information like it does in the number 2 entry. So if you're wanting to see what series this is, click on the title of the book and see where it says series right there. And it says Anchor Yale Bible. Anchor Bible is one of my commentary recommendations. So that's on the list too. All right. Scroll down. And again, so series, Kidner Classics, that's not one of mine. Series, Two Horizons, that's not one of mine. If you're not finding what you're looking for, just keep checking. Okay, you can go to the next page. Okay, New Collegeville Bible. Again, not that these are bad. These are just, I'm wanting to point you guys to the better stuff out there. Okay, so here's another entry of the Tyndale commentary we saw earlier. If you keep going, here's one that's on my list, Word Biblical Commentary. Okay, so you can click on that and it'll give you access to the commentary. Here's another one that's on my list, the NIV Application Commentary. Okay, so all of these are in online form here. And different commentaries, so next week, if you're doing the Gospels, it might not come up with the same ones. Why they have certain ones online, why they have certain ones that aren't online, I'm not entirely sure. It's got to be a copyright thing, I'm sure. But I've shown you right now that you can already find 4 different types of commentaries for your paper. You only have to use one on your paper, 1 or 2. But just to show that that's how easy it is to find this stuff, in case you guys were not entirely sure or clear on how to use the online search for your commentary. So hope that helps. Hope that's clear. If there's any questions on it, just again shoot me an email and I'll help steer us on track. Okay, let's go back to our lecture. All right. So again, we're in the second half. We're looking at our spiritual discipline reflections, and today we're looking at simplicity and stewardship. And you did some reading on this. And again, hopefully it's clear. From this point on, all of the spiritual discipline readings will be uploaded on Canvas as scanned readings. I'm scanning the chapters that are relevant for you guys, and all you got to do is find the one you want to read, either Foster or Whitney or Ortberg. Just click on it. It's already got a scanned copy there, and it's the same as usual. You'll still do the reading. You'll still turn in notes. You're turning in your reading report notes on Canvas now as well. Okay. So for today, to kind of get the ball rolling, I'm sure you guys know this passage, Philippians 4:13. It's a favorite for a lot of folks. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. This is a favorite passage for a lot of folks. This is kind of their go-to passage. And for many reasons, I'm sure. Here's the question I want to ask. I know what a lot of people kind of make this passage to be. I want to ask you guys, here's our big key word here. What is the context of this passage? Okay, this is something we've emphasized over and over in our class. The best way to understand biblical passages, any one biblical verse or sentence or phrase, is going to be best understood by paying attention, setting it within its context. I know we all know this verse. I wonder how many of us know the context of this passage. So here's what I want you to do. Ideally, if we were still meeting together as a class, I would break you guys up into groups of 4 and look at the passage yourselves, look at the context, and discuss it amongst each other. Obviously, we're not able to do that at this point. So this is basically just on you. Take some time. I'm going to give just a slight pause, but obviously you can simply pause the video yourself. Take a look at the context of this passage. What is going on in Philippians 4 that leads Paul, he's the one that's writing this, he's the one that makes a statement. What is it that leads Paul to make this statement? What is he discussing that brings this statement up? Have a look at it yourself. Take some time, go ahead and pause the video. And when you're ready, come on back and we'll move forward. All right, so at this point, I'll assume that you've taken a look at the context of the passage yourself, you paused this video, and you've gotten a good understanding of this context of the passage itself. Okay, hopefully what became clear is that maybe this passage has a little bit something different in mind than what we're used to thinking of when we hear this passage passed around. I know for me, when I hear people use this passage, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, it usually applies to kind of personal goals and ambitions in life. So for example, I can run that race, I can get first place, I can make the basketball team, I can achieve this personal goal, I can get that dream job, that house. And this passage used as a kind of bolster for that hope. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me to accomplish my personal goals. My question simply is this: is this what Paul is talking about when he makes this statement? It's okay to have a personal goal and a dream, and maybe an encouragement that if this is what God wills for you, He will bring it about for you. I'm not knocking that idea. I'm simply asking the question: is that what this passage is specifically talking about, or is there something else that Paul has in mind when he talks about all things that he can do through Christ who strengthens me? Well, hopefully, if you've looked at this passage carefully, you know that there's something else he has in mind. What does Paul have in mind? Let's first keep in mind what's going on in this passage. Where is Paul? Where is Paul when he's writing this letter, when he's making this statement? And hopefully it's clear enough in this passage. If not, it's clear in the entire letter. Paul is in prison as he's making this statement. He's writing to the Philippians because they've been generous enough to give him a gift, a financial gift to help him while he's, without very much while in prison. He's thanking them for this gift. But he seems to be kind of back and forth on how he views the gift. On one sense, he sounds very grateful to receive the gift and appreciative of it. And yet, on the other hand, he makes it sound like, but I didn't really need it. I didn't need the gift. And then he kind of goes back and says, hopefully I'm not sounding ungrateful. And yet, at the same time, I was fine without it. What is Paul doing in this passage? Well, he starts to talk about his present circumstances and what he's able to do and able to get through. Again, he's in prison, and he starts talking about things like, I've learned at this point how to navigate life, how to go through the ups and downs. And he makes statements like, I know what it is to be full in my belly, and I know what it is to be hungry. I know what it's like to have everything at my disposal and to have nothing at my disposal, in a sense, is kind of what he's saying. And it's out of the context of that discussion that he makes this statement. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So the all things that Paul is talking about here, interestingly, is about a very specific thing. It's in relation to material provisions. He's saying that whether he has many material blessings or next to nothing at all, either way, he's content in the strength available to him, made available to him through Christ. It's through all these kinds of things that Christ gives him strength. Okay, and again, Paul is in jail when he writes this, so he's not writing as if he has no idea what he's talking about. He knows very well what it's like to go without anything, and yet it's in the midst of this experience of such destitution that he can make this confident statement, that he can say that he's content with the strength that he has in Christ to go about these hard times, good or bad. So what we have here, Paul's words here, and his life all around, shows us that he cultivated a life of simplicity and that he considered everything he had as a stewardship entrusted to him, nothing belonging to him, but all for the benefit of the purposes of building up God's kingdom. So this is what we're looking at today. The spiritual discipline of simplicity and stewardship. Sorry, what's the context of that? I should have jumped to that earlier. Okay, but you get the idea. All right, so let's break some of our key terms down here. Simplicity. What is simplicity? What are we talking about when we're talking about simplicity as relates to the Christian? What is Christian simplicity? And this is how we're explaining it. It's living life with the undivided purpose of seeking and serving God. Okay, Matthew 6:33. This is Jesus' statement. It's in the context of those who might be worried or anxious about, what will we eat, what will we wear, will we have clothing on our bodies, and Jesus says, you don't need to worry about these things. He's not saying, these are of no matter. He's clearly saying that this is an important thing. But he's saying that it's God that's going to take care of you for these things. You don't need to spend your focus on these things. Rather, he says, Matthew 6:33, seek first God's kingdom, his righteousness, make that your priority, and all these things will be added to you. All these things will be given to you because that's what God's going to step in and do. That's what he will help take care of you for. So if that's the case, if we don't need to worry about these things, in a sense, we have a very simple, okay, notice that term there, we have a very simple goal, a very simple objective. And that's to simply pursue God and his righteousness, his kingdom purposes. That's a simple task. Not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's simple in the sense of that's the one thing. It's not pursue God and also do this and make sure you take care of your house and make sure you take care of your you concern about where you're going to get your food from. All those things Jesus is saying, that's what you don't need to get overly anxious about. To do that is to complexify your life in a sense. Jesus is saying, here's the simple task. Pursue God and his purposes, and he'll take care of things for you. Think of, as we look at Philippians 3:13 through 14, Paul uses the metaphor of a runner. He says, as I run, I'm running this race, and I'm not looking behind at what's behind me, but I keep my eyes on the prize, pressing on for the upward call. Paul compares the Christian life to like an Olympic athlete running a race. It's a good image here for what we're talking about here. An Olympic runner is competing in the most important race of his life, and he has one goal. Just one goal, one purpose. It's to win the race. It's as simple as that. It's not necessarily easy, but it's as simple as that. There's no other thing he has to do than to win the race. That's the one goal, the one purpose, and that's what makes it simple. How could he make things complex? He could make things complex by focusing on things that do not matter in relation to the race. But if he's a good runner, and we assume he is, he's not going to be doing that. Guaranteed, he's not, during his race, going to be wondering things like, did I leave the iron on at home? Okay, that's not going to help him in his goal. That's going to be irrelevant toward accomplishing his goal. And any other thoughts that come to his mind, other than winning the race, is going to be a hindrance. And it's going to simply make things more complex for him. But he's not going to be doing that, because he's got one goal in mind: run the race and simply win the race. Paul compares that, in a sense, to the Christian life. He says, in a sense, we are all in a race, and there's going to be lots of things that pose potential distractions that will keep us from running the race well, which is why Paul says he doesn't concern himself with anything in this race if it doesn't press him forward toward the goal of reaching Christ. That's his primary goal. That's his one goal. That's his simple goal. Now, we're not necessarily saying that things like concern for a good job, or the right kind of job that God would bless us with to honor him, or concerns for a spouse or a house or kids or even material possessions. We're not saying that those things are not important. We're not saying that they don't play a part in our life. They're not bad things. We're simply saying that these are not our primary focus. These aren't the one thing. None of those things are the one thing that we live for. What is the one thing that we live for? And both Jesus and Paul make clear, it's pursuing a life of righteousness in God, pursuing God's kingdom. Anything else that comes in the life might be a good blessing, it might be a good thing, but it's not the thing that we pursue. If anything, it's anything that we use to help us better pursue the one goal of living life in obedience to God and his purposes in his kingdom. Okay, that's Christian simplicity. The simple goal, the one simple objective goal of pursuing God's kingdom and his purposes. Okay, Christian stewardship is making use of the things God's given to us in a God-honoring way. So again, we're not saying that these other things like a job, a house, kids, wife, we're not saying that those are bad things and should be renounced. Of course not. That'd be going in a completely different direction. But they're not the goal. If they're not the goal, though, then what exactly are they? And we need to think of them in terms of stewardship. They are the things that God gives us in order to use them, to have them in our lives, to basically honor God with the things that he's given us. We make use of the things that God's given us to honor him, and that's what it is to view these things as a stewardship. Okay, Scripture is very clear on this. It's abundantly clear that everything we have is a gift from God, and that it ultimately belongs to him. Okay, we don't own anything. This was kind of helpfully brought out in either both the Whitney reading and the Foster reading, right? Nothing that we have is really ours. Anything and everything we have is really God's. It belongs to Him. So if it belongs to Him, us possessing it is just in terms of stewardship. We're simply, in a sense, managers of the things that God's given to us. But if we're only managers of these things, then we ought to be using what God's given us in a way that honors Him. This is basically what Jesus' parable of the talents in Matthew 25 illustrates. Okay, He calls His stewards together. He gives his stewards different talents, and they all go about doing business with the talents differently. Some steward well the things that the master's given them, and he's pleased with them and praises them. And there are those who don't steward the master's possessions very well, and they're rebuked. The whole idea is everything that God has is His and is simply given to His people, not for them to take ownership of, but to make use for His purposes. And so the question is, how can we best use the things that God's given us for His purposes, to bless Him, to move His kingdom purposes forward? We could discuss the many gifts that God's given us as steward. For those of you who read Whitney, you saw that one of the things that we're to use in a God-honoring way is simply the time that we're given. Okay, and that's definitely an important discussion. But we're going to focus on something else. Considering the very consumer-driven culture that we're saturated in, I want us to focus on the other issue that both Whitney and Foster discuss in regards to simplicity and stewardship, and that's the issue of money, our wealth. What does the Bible have to say about money? It's actually a really big topic, a really big theme in the Bible, and you got, again, a hint of that in your reading of Whitney and Foster. The Bible has a lot to say about money and how we're to use money. Now, obviously, we can't discuss everything related to this topic, so we're simply going to boil this down into three key points about money that relate to living a simple life and stewarding well the things that God's given to us. Okay, so first point, having a biblical perspective of money. One of our first points is that we are called to keep this in mind, that we cannot serve both God and money. And this is a very clear statement that Jesus makes in Matthew 6:24 and Luke 16:13. I'm sure you guys all know the passage too. You cannot serve both God and money. You will serve the one and hate the other. The desire for money is easily one of those things that motivates us not just for the day, not just for the year, but for our entire lives. And this is kind of reflected. This is what we see in Jesus' encounter with the rich young ruler. If you remember that story, a rich young ruler comes to Jesus and asks what he needs to see the kingdom. And Jesus begins to talk about the Ten Commandments. You know the Ten Commandments, don't you? And he's basically reflecting to some degree, this is what God's kingdom looks like. It looks like abiding by these principles of God. And the rich young ruler feels very confident. He says, yeah, I've done those things. What else do I lack? Now, irrespective of whether or not he followed those well or not, let's just take for granted that he's done a decent job with those. Okay, Jesus says, there's one more thing you lack, though. And he seems to have known exactly what was at the heart of this man's, where his heart really lied. He says, one more thing you lack. Sell everything, sell all that you own, give it away to the poor, and come follow me. And we know the story, right? The man's distraught. He can't believe that this is what he's been told to do if he wants to see the kingdom, and he walks away. And he couldn't do it because he loved his money, because his money mattered that much more. Now, I don't think the point of the passage is that Jesus is calling everyone to give away all their possessions to see the kingdom. That's not the point. The point is, if that's where your heart is set, if money matters more to you, then it will keep you from your Lord. It will keep you from serving God with a whole heart. Jesus seemed to perceive that this was this man's greatest challenge. He loved money too much. He loved it more, so much more, than God's kingdom. His master was not truly God, but money. A clear example that you can't serve both. Okay. So one of the things you want to watch out for is the danger of the place that money can have on our lives. It's important. God gives us money to bless us, to bless one another, to take care of one another. But it can't be the thing that we devote our lives to. If we do, we, without realizing or not, whether we realize or not, we end up turning our lives in a way that goes more towards serving money than it is towards serving God. Number 2, love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. I'm sure you've kind of heard a version of this passage. Sometimes it gets tossed around as love of money is the root of evil, which is not what the passage says. It doesn't say love of money is the root of evil. It says love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Okay. Focusing on money, again, not only tears you away from God or has potential to turn you away from God, the other flip side of that is it can lead you down the paths of other awful, evil things. So not only is seeking after financial gain a barrier to one's relationship with God, but as Paul says, it's even a pathway to evil itself. Here's a question. What would people do for the right price? You give someone enough money, what would they do? Would you do this for this much money? No? How about this much money? No, still not enough? How about this much money? For some folks, the love of money, you give them the right price, and people are willing to do some unspeakable things. One of my favorite shows that I often like watching, I still watch pretty regularly to this day, is a show called Forensic Files. They're crime cases, and the different technological advancements that continue to take place as scientists and specialists are able to find the key information that helps solve a crime. Anyway, a lot of these stories, they're stories about a murder that's committed, a very serious crime that's committed. And what do you think, you probably can guess based on our topic of discussion, what do you think is quite often the key motivator, the key reason for some of these crimes, horrible crimes, being committed? What do you think the most common motive for murder was? If you guessed money, you guessed it. Yeah, money. What will you do for the right price? Well, for some folks, it's as simple as committing murder for the right price. It's crazy to think about. It's sad to see some of the things on the show. It's unbelievable what people will do for more money. I've seen people through this show murder their spouses. I've seen cases of children murder their parents. And I've seen cases of parents murdering their own children. Why? Simply for money, to get money. And it's sad and it's scary. Obviously, these are extreme cases, and I'm not suggesting that any of us would necessarily resort to those things. But are we really all that immune to some of the dangers of the love of money? Okay, maybe we're not willing to go the lengths of some of these folks in these shows. But does our desire for money maybe cause us to neglect our family? Does our desire for money maybe cause us to think too highly of ourselves? to step on others, to get ahead? What things will the love of money cause us to do in terms of going down the wrong kind of path? So yeah, money is important. We need money in our lives to take care of ourselves, to take care of others, but we need to be careful of the things the love of money can do. So what are we to do? Are we just to completely shun money? Obviously not. But so what is a corrective here? What could we be doing? What should we be doing? And it's fairly simple to some extent. Paul says he calls believers to simply be generous. It's interesting, and there was a good, helpful point brought up. I think it was in Whitney. There's no exact amount told to be given for the New Testament believer. Okay, no amount is told. It's simply kind of fairly broadly, generically said, be generous. Be generous with what you have. And if you look in this passage, it's interesting. Paul is especially talking to the rich, because again, they're the ones that are going to have money. It's going to be obvious that those who have are going to be encouraged to give to those who don't. But it's interesting. Paul does not instruct the rich to become poor. Okay, he doesn't tell them, hey, you have way too much, you should be leveling the playing field entirely. He doesn't tell the rich to continue to give to the point where they become poor. He simply calls the rich to be generous with their riches, whatever that looks like. But be generous. It may be that God has chosen to bless certain people with wealth. The question is, how will that person, with their wealth, steward that wealth? Okay, and for us, how will we steward what we've been given? Are we open and willing to be generous with the things that we're given? We had this experiment at our church a while back. 10 random people were each given $100, and they were told to use that money towards building God's kingdom in some way. Okay, completely up to them. It was $100 given to them. They could use it in whatever way they wanted, so long as it was in some way being used toward building God's kingdom. What was interesting was each person thought very carefully about how to use this money and to use it for good purposes. Nobody really spent the money flippantly or casually, like they might have done maybe if it was their own money. Why? It's because they were very clearly instructed that this was not their money, but that it was set aside for God. So they wanted to be that much more careful, thoughtful, intentional about how they use their money for God's kingdom. We should have that same mindset. We need to have that same mindset with everything that God has given us. Nothing that we have is really ours. It all belongs to God. So we need to ask ourselves, are we being generous towards God's purposes with the things he's given us? Are we making sure that we're not pursuing the love of money above the love that we have toward the Lord? Are we making sure that we are not being stingy toward the things that God's given us? Are we making sure that we're not using our money and the things that we have solely for our pleasure and for our comfort? Are we using it in ways that are building up God's kingdom and building up his purposes? I've got a picture of a guy in the bottom right corner there, and if you haven't been thinking about why that guy's there, or if you've been wondering the whole time who on earth is that guy and why is he in this little PowerPoint slide, good question. This is John D. Rockefeller, J.D. Rockefeller. He's one of the wealthiest industrialists in American history. Okay, stupid, stinking rich. The wealthiest guy in his era at his time. He was once asked, how much money is enough, bud? Be interesting to ask the wealthiest guy in the world. How much money is enough money? When you're that filthy, stinking rich, at what point is enough enough? How much is enough? Allegedly, apparently, his answer to the question, just how much is enough, apparently his response was just a little bit more. Just a little bit more is what the richest man in the world said in response to the question, how much is enough? In other words, you're never really, if you're pursuing money, the love of money, you're never fully satisfied. You're always chasing after that. Unless we decide that that's not going to be us. Unless we decide we are not going to be about pursuing money, the love of money, the things that money can buy. That's not going to be our main goal. We're called to a higher purpose, a higher calling with a better goal and a better destination. And we get there not by grabbing more money, but by pursuing Christ with all our hearts. That's what the Christian life of simplicity and stewardship fosters. How much is enough? Just a little bit more. There it is. So, for the spiritual disciplines reflection for this next week, you have an assignment instructions on Canvas. I just posted those up earlier. They come from Foster's chapter where he lists a few different tangible things that we can do to encourage a life of simplicity and stewardship. So basically what I'm asking you to do is to look over that list and pick 2 things that you feel may be most called to in terms of a personal challenge. Maybe 2 of those lists you think, okay, this is where I really struggle in living a life of simplicity and stewardship, and this is where maybe I need to be challenged, and here's why. Okay, this one's primarily a reflective assignment. It's not there's very little actual doing of something. It's simply a more of a thought assignment for you. Okay, so but the instructions are there. Follow the instructions there. Also, do next week, and hopefully this is getting clear as we go. You are doing one of 2 things. You are either doing a genre paper on the prophets. Okay, the things that we just talked about in this lecture should be in your paper. Or you are doing a biblical interpretation paper on Amos 7:7-9. How do you know which one you're doing? Glad you asked. Check the sign-up sheet that's on the BIP material folder. The blue list is everything that you signed up for a BIP. Scroll down, and the green list is everything that you're meant to do for the GP, the genre paper. All right, so hopefully that's all good and clear for you guys. Hopefully this was clear enough for you. This is, again, a little bit odd doing all this without an actual people in the room. But again, if you have any questions on anything, if anything's not clear, just shoot me an email. Please make sure you're checking your emails on a regular basis. This is mainly our only line of communication for each other. So anything that I need to let you guys know, I'm shooting out to you through email. So please just make sure you're checking your email fairly regularly. All right, guys. I will be in touch with you again soon.